feminist system is strong.
So high, but motors on, everyone's John, and everyone's John, and everyone's John. To take your money, to take your soul, they can't.
All right, guys. This is Shay Bernhardt, the manager at Brooklyn Station LLC, KingandQueenRadio.com, BrooklynStation.com, SisterDopeBomb.com, and of course, I must say, if you want to advertise on the show, I will provide contact information during the show. And of course, be sure to go to BrooklynStation.com or KingandQueenRadio.com and check out all our artists on the artist link and download the music to support our artists. Let's see. From this point on, I have to dig into some stuff that's kind of unpleasant and I don't know, it may alienate some people. So before I start digging into the face of the adversary, which is the term I use for various basically the forces that are operating against us. Now there's many names for this force. Throughout history, you got the demiurge, you got basically your alien agenda, you got the plethora. Choose whatever name you want for the adversary. Just like the divinity, I just lump it all under one term: the adversary, that which operates against us. And there's a lot of evidence and quite a bit of documentation regarding the force that is trying to basically diminish the human species back into slavery, basically. And if you watch the last episode, you'll notice that there was a couple hints from abductees and the interviews with them that kind of hinted basically an agenda to dumb us down so much that our bodies can be taken over as vehicles for these other beings. Doesn't really matter what you choose to believe or what speaks to your heart. It's not so much the semantics. At Babel, they not only confused our tongue, but they confused the meanings behind our words. So we keep on getting stuck in these semantics. The bottom line is that each culture and each epoch or each era that these cultures develop in, they have different ways of perceiving and relating to the world around them. And so when they try to describe events or knowledge that's passed down to them, they tend to do it through the filter of their own perception. And that means, at one point in time you had demons, angels, or, your various Anunnaki, and then you had God and the devil, and then you had, now you got the alien agenda. It doesn't really matter whether you call them demons, greys, lizards, whatever. I don't care what you want to call them. This malevolent force trying to enslave us is a reality. There's more than enough documentation and more than enough evidence to put a person on death row in this country, and I'm not joking. So the topic we're covering this time is basically the fact that, as I predicted, since the Biden administration took over, the U.S. has become the largest child trafficking ring in the world. We have something like 350,000 children unaccompanied that crossed the border. 85,000 of those are missing. Actually, it's closer to 100,000 now, because the Congressional hearings I'm showing in this episode are actually a year old, and nothing's been done, and it doesn't really look like anybody's planning on doing anything but, selling more children. And that's the group that wrote the top secret, the leaked top secret document that it's parts of it are in this episode, but of course I've read the relevant parts in the first episode. So if you haven't seen that, I would actually recommend going to the lawfulpath.org and getting their copy and downloading it and reading it. Now, as of 2023, there are an estimated 117 million refugees worldwide. 40% of them are children. As far as the statistics of the world population, you have basically a 30% child to adult ratio. And so that means it boils down to about 46,800,000 children that have no home, no homeland. Out of those, 4,680,000 are unaccompanied minors, give or take. I didn't get deep into the math, but that's basically the stats on it. I don't care who you are, what you believe the underlying causes are, whatever, this is a serious problem. And it's going to get worse. Our so-called leaders are pushing us towards war, and it seems like they're bound and determined to throw some nukes in on this time. And it's like another statistic that's kind of interesting is in the last 100 years, if you average it out daily, basically 54,746.5 people per day, every day for the past 100 years is what it boils down to, the fatalities due to totalitarian governments and war. 2 billion deaths in 100 years. Basically close to 60,000 people a day, every single day for the last 100 years. So it seems to me like war's just not really seeming to solve anything. Call me crazy, but do we really need a third world war? What's that going to do for the whole, our whole environmental issue? I shudder to think, and the weapons they're going to come out with this time are, who knows? Basically, the bottom line is it's only through worldwide awakening that we can avoid extinction. So that's kind of what my point is. Now, there's plenty of places you can go that will show you the path to enlightenment. But one of the things that is often neglected that teachers often neglect, but you'll hear people that have gained some wisdom speak of, is the process of unlearning. And that's what this show is about: preceding clarity, the conflict that precedes clarity. That conflict that precedes clarity is always basically the conflict between two opposing ideas that are basically fighting each other within your heart. I am the opposing idea, hopefully. Pay attention. I speak on many different levels, and what I do is well researched. I do use AI for the imagery and to do some of the narration now, but AI does not do my research. They do not write my script, and I just use it as a tool because it's a good tool for one person doing a podcast. Anyway, so what it boils down to is this. All right. I'm a person of very sharp contrast. So for anybody that might think this episode is offensive in any way, shape, or form, understand that there's only one type of person in this world: us. All right. So please don't think that I'm insensitive or in any way biased. I'm not. There's only one human being there's only one type of human in this world, and that is us. I don't care where you're from. I don't care what you believe. I don't care I don't care about any of that. All I see is another human being struggling to make it in this world. So, keep that in mind. Whenever you want to be offended by what I say, it's probably because it hit a nerve, and if it hits a nerve, then you might want to look at it. That's all I can say. It basically, so enjoy the episode. Again, this is brooklynstation.com. Don't forget to check out kingandqueenradio.com, sisterdobong.com. I will, of course, provide numbers to call Sister Dobong if you want throughout the episode for a one free question. And enjoy the show.
The views and opinions expressed in this program do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Brooklyn Station LLC, brooklynstation.com, KingandDQueenRadio.com, or any of its affiliates. The information provided is for informational and entertainment purposes only.
Our final witness is Ms. Rodas, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman McClintock, Ranking Member Japal, and distinguished members of the committee. It is an honor to be here. I thank you for the invitation to share my testimony. My goal is to inspire action to safeguard the lives of migrant children, including the staggering 85,000 that are missing. Today, children will work overnight shifts at slaughterhouses, factories, restaurants to pay their debts to smugglers and traffickers. Today, children will be sold for sex. Today, children will call a hotline to report they are being abused, neglected, and trafficked, and we don't know if they're going to get the help they need. For nearly a decade, unaccompanied children have been suffering in the shadows, and I have to confess I knew nothing about their suffering until 2021, when I volunteered to help the Biden administration with the crisis at the southern border. As part of Operation Artemis, I was deployed to the Pomona Fairplex Emergency Intake Site in California to help HHS, Office of Refugee Resettlement, reunite children with sponsors in the United States. I thought I was going to help place children in loving homes. Instead, I discovered that children are being trafficked through a sophisticated network that begins with recruiting in home country, smuggling to the US border, and ends when ORR delivers a child to a sponsor. Some sponsors are criminals and traffickers and members of transnational criminal organizations. Some sponsors view children as commodities and assets to be used for earning income. This is why we are witnessing an explosion of labor trafficking. Now, whether it's intentional or not, it could be argued that the United States government has become the middleman in a large-scale, multi-billion-dollar child trafficking operation that is run by bad actors seeking to profit off of the lives of children. As for me, my interest is the safety of the children. I do not view this as a political issue. I view this as a humanitarian issue. I assure you, my motives are the highest and best. I want the children protected. So I want to tell you some of what I witnessed personally at the Pomona Fairplex. I saw vulnerable indigenous children from Guatemala who speak Mayan dialects and cannot speak Spanish. That means they cannot ask for help in English. They cannot ask for help in Spanish. They become captives of their sponsors. I have sat with case managers as they've cried to tell me the horror of what has happened to children as they make the journey to this country. I saw apartment buildings where 20, 30, and 40 unaccompanied minors have been released. I saw sponsors trying to simultaneously sponsor children from multiple ORR sites at one time. I saw sponsors using multiple addresses to obtain sponsorships of children. And I saw numerous cases of children in debt bondage, and the child knew they had to stay with the sponsor until the debt was paid. Realizing that we were not offering the children the American dream, but instead putting them in modern-day slavery with wicked overlords was a terrible revelation. A terrible revelation. These children are a captive victim population with no access to law enforcement or knowledge of their rights. They are extorted, abused, neglected, and that is why I blew the whistle in 2021. I witnessed firsthand the horrors of child trafficking and exploitation. My life will never be the same after what I saw.
I didn't sign up for this. You didn't tell me that you won't stay. You didn't. You promised me. You promised me. I didn't sign up for this. You didn't say you'd break my heart. I didn't sign up for this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Marcos, can I just start with you? You testified a moment ago to Senator Butler that every child gets a Know Your Rights presentation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Is that before or after you release them to labor traffickers?
Senator, every child that comes into our care gets a Know Your Rights presentation as well as...
Have you read these New York Times reports, these stories, the series of stories the New York Times has done on the children who are in your care? Have you read them?
Yes, I have.
Have you read that children are scrubbing dishes, they are operating heavy machinery, they are delivering meals, they are harvesting coffee, they are working construction, they are working as housekeepers, they are working overnight shifts at plants where they are not paid, they are not going to school, they are not cared for, they are not giving meals, almost all of it illegally. Are you aware of that? That's a yes or no.
Yes.
Do the Know Your Rights presentation help them in those situations?
Senator, ORR...
That's a yes or no, I think. Do you really think that you're helping these children by releasing them to labor traffickers and, yes, sex traffickers? 85,000 children whom you have no contact with, and your answer is, we gave them a presentation before we turned them over to these people who are exploiting them on a scale not seen in this country for 100 years, a century. A century. It's a disgrace in the United States of America. Let me ask you this. You did an audit, I noticed, where you gave yourself a clean bill of health. So just tell me this. Do you require sponsors to document their relationship with the child?
Senator, we have a thorough vetting process.
Do you require sponsors to document their relationship with the child?
Yes, we go through...
No, you do not. You do not. Have you read the Senate's Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations reports on your office? There was one in 2016, there was one in 2018, there was one in 2020, there was one in 2022. Spanning administrations, what they found is you do not require sponsors to document their relationship with the child. You release them anyway. What about background checks? Do you require background checks on all adults in the household?
In cases where the child is being released to their parents, we do not require background checks. But Senator, I would
Do you require background checks on all adults in the household in any case?
Yes, in some cases we do.
What percentage of cases do you do background checks on the adults in the household?
I don't have that number.
Do you do home visits in all cases? You can actually see where these children are being released, whose care you're putting them in?
We do not do home visits in all cases. Senator, I'd really like the opportunity to talk about what we are doing.
I know what you're doing, and it's incredibly and totally inadequate. And we can read about it in the New York Times. Since you say you've read it, let's talk a little bit about that New York Times report if we could. Here's a quote from the April 17th installment. Again and again, veteran government staffers and outside contractors told HHS, including reports that reached the Secretary, that children appeared to be at risk. Did you warn the Secretary that children were at risk?
Senator, I'm in regular contact with the Secretary.
Did you warn him that children were at risk?
Safety and well-being of children is our top priority.
Did you warn him that children were at risk?
I'm not going to get into the conversations I've had.
You're here and you're under oath, and this is an oversight hearing, and we need to know what you're doing because you're manifestly not doing your job. Did you warn him that children were at risk? Do you believe that children are at risk? Let's start with that.
Yes.
Okay, did you warn the Secretary?
Senator, I'm not going to get into the specifics of my conversation, but I would like the opportunity
Why wouldn't
to
you
talk
warn the Secretary that children were at
I
risk?
would like the opportunity to talk about what we
Let's
are
look at what the
doing.
Secretary said to you. The other one, James. Yeah, that one. At least 5 HHS staff members said they were pushed out after raising concerns about child safety. Mr. Becerra, that's the Secretary, told the ORR director, that's you, right, that if she could not increase the number of discharges, he would find someone who could. And then he went on to say that if Henry Ford had run his plants like this, he would never have become famous and rich. This is not the way you do an assembly line. Get the kids out, run them through, get them out to those sponsors, those traffickers. Why didn't you resign when he said this? Do you think that this is morally acceptable?
Senator, I joined ORR in September of 2022. I believe that was reported prior to my arrival, but I cannot speak
This is from
to,
the article this year.
I can't speak to what the secretary.
Do you think that this is acceptable to run ORR like an assembly line and to release these children to traffickers?
We do not run ORR like an assembly line. The safety and well-being of children is our top concern, and by
Plainly
statute,
not. Plainly, it is not your top concern because you have managed to lose 85,000 of them. And the Times knows where they are, or 2/3 of them, and they're with labor traffickers. It's unbelievable. Let me just ask you this. How many kids right now, the 430,000 approximately, unaccompanied children have crossed the border into this administration? It's an astounding number. How many are you in regular contact with right now?
Senator, we have a number of different providers across the country.
But what's the number? What's the number? How many of you are you in? You said child welfare is your top concern. What's the number?
I don't have the specific number.
How can you not know? Why would you come to this hearing and not know?
Respectfully, if you would like us to provide comprehensive case management to children after they're released from our care, so we can report.
Respectfully, I would like you to do your job and not release children to human traffickers. Respectfully, that's what I would like. I'd like you not facilitate the largest child trafficking ring in American history. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I didn't sign up for this. You didn't tell me that you won't stay. You didn't. You promised me. You promised me. I didn't sign up for this. You didn't say you're right.
Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a week ago, the New York Times reported that the Biden administration has downplayed repeated signs that migrant children are being widely exploited. I would go on record today and say it doesn't sound like just the Biden administration based on what I'm hearing in here, but Ms. Rodas, you mentioned something and it kind of triggered a response a while ago. You said these kids are being recruited in their home country. What do you mean by that?
So, and I'd be happy to submit for the record, we have children saying that there are radio advertisements in their hometowns. So in Huehuetenango, for example, in Guatemala, they're actually advertising on the radio, come with us, we'll give you passage to the United States. There's an example of a sponsor who currently is in Austin, Texas at this moment. He attempted to sponsor 4 children, 1 from the Pomona Fairplex Emergency Intake Site and 3 from the Pecos Emergency Intake Site, promising work to these children who were making $2.50 a day on the coffee farm he owns in Guatemala. So he lured them here. Now, fortunately, they were put into long-term care, but they are being lured here. Facebook ads and other things. Children are being lured here and then put to work here.
So it doesn't sound like they're fleeing as much as they're being baited to come here in a lot of ways from what I'm hearing.
In many ways, they're not fleeing. In many ways, I mean, let's take El Salvador, for example. No one is fleeing from Nayib Bukele. He has a very safe society right now. Yes, maybe in times past, people were fleeing El Salvador from the gangs, but sadly, the gangs have now set up operation here, and we have evidence that there are many of them who are running the networks here who have the children. It's indisputable evidence that Department of Homeland Security has transnational criminal organizations on the TOC watch list, some of who got their fingerprints here in Washington, D.C. and neighboring areas are sponsoring the children. It's indisputable.
You mentioned, too, debt bondage. What do you mean when you say debt bondage, and who does the money go to?
So the money goes to the trafficker who ultimately brings them here. The New York Times actually showed, I think, Hannah Dreyer did an amazing expose where she actually showed the debt page of the child, how much the child had to pay for food, how much the child had to pay for rent, all of those things.
So the administration is really, we're engaged in creating slavery. We are trafficking slaves to this country.
Absolutely. There is no doubt. We have created a pull, and because this criminal element tragically views children as a commodity, they see us as the middleman because we're paying the flight directly to the end user, the trafficker.
I remember,
paying
I was
for
at
that.
Fort Bliss Emergency Intake Center. I mentioned this last week in a hearing, and I was there as they were shipping kids on buses all over the country. And I actually asked the admiral running the place, I said, are we doing background checks? We're sending these kids to Google addresses. And he's like, no, we're just building the bus as we drive it. And so they were just shipping children. American taxpayers, basically, we're trafficking children.
Yes.
And making the cartel wealthy in the process and creating a bunch of minors in bad, bad situations.
Yes, yes, going back to 2014, which was astounding to me because I did not know when I deployed for this mission that one child had ever been trafficked through the program. So the horror when someone sent me the 2016 Senate report, I'm sitting there on the Pomona site seeing all these strange things and all these multiple sponsors at multiple addresses trying to collect these kids from multiple sites. And I read the report and I thought, which side am I on?
Right. Which side are you on?
Which side? Because we know about trafficking all the way back then, how teens were lured from Guatemala, put in slave labor conditions where they were held sometimes at gunpoint and their families were threatened to be killed.
So I've got about 45 seconds. Thank you for being a whistleblower. I guess they didn't treat you very nicely when you blew the whistle, I understand.
No, they did not. They threatened me with investigation. They walked me off the emergency intake site and they took my badge. My agency, thankfully, I work for the Council of the Inspectors General. I'm not here in that capacity, but they actually offered to send agents to retrieve me, to escort me home because they were concerned for my safety. It's a terrible thing when you blow the whistle and to try to save children, and then you are retaliated against for trying to help. HHS did everything they could to keep all of this silent.
Let me ask one more question. You said these kids, that they talk about always sending them to their moms and their dads. You're saying they hand them a piece of paper and tell them this is your mom and this is your dad. Is that what I gathered from the testimony?
Well, as they're making their journey, that happens, but then also the case managers who are not law enforcement, right? They're not investigative. They are receiving documents, photographs of documents on their WhatsApp phone. And there's a perfect example. A 20-plus-year-old man sponsored what we believed was his sister, who was only 16 years old. He submitted a birth certificate for himself and her as brother and sister. And then, about 10 days after she's released, we see she's for sale on his WhatsApp page. You know, her shirt is buttoned down to her navel. She's all made up. The documents, there is no one at HHS vetting the children who is
That's where we need law
capable to
enforcement.
determine.
I'm out of time.
When Morpheus holds up the battery and he says, we are the energy. And when I first saw the Matrix, I had no idea what he was talking about. I now have a much better idea what Morpheus was saying. What we energy for at this stage is open to interpretation. But what I do know, more than anything I've ever held dear, is that everything we've been taught is a lie.
Don't let them control it. They will indoctrinate you. Don't believe their lies. It's all bullshit. Everything you believe is a lie. Howdy. Is controlled by your belief. Open your mind. Don't let them control you. They will indoctrinate you. Don't believe their lies. It's all bullshit.
Sudo sibudo sinaranjanasi samsara maya pariyajitesi samsara svavanam jajamohad nidram najanma mrityor trisat svarupi Sudo sibudo sinaranjanasi samsara maya pariyajitesi samsara svavanam jajamohad nidram najanma mrityor trisat svarupi Sudo sibudo sinaranjanasi samsara maya pariyajitesi samsara svavanam jajamohad nidram najanma mrityor trisat svarupi Sudo sibudo sinaranjanasi samsara maya pariyajitesi samsara svavanam jajamohad nidram najanma mrityor trisat svarupi You are forever pure, you are forever true, and the dream of this world can never touch you. So give up your attachment and give up your confusion and fly to that space that's beyond all illusion. You are forever pure, you are forever true, and the dream of this world can never touch you. So give up your attachment and give up your confusion and fly to that space that's beyond all illusion. You are forever pure, you are forever true, and the dream of this world can never touch you. So give up your attachment and give up your confusion and fly to that space that's beyond all illusion. You are forever pure, you are forever true, and the dream of this world can never touch you. So give up your attachment and give up your confusion and fly to that space that's beyond all illusion.
The following is a quote from Operations Research Technical Manual TW SW 7905.1. Also known as Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, after it was leaked by someone that found it jammed in a Boeing surplus Xerox in 1979.
In order to achieve a completely predictable economy, it is deemed essential to exert control over the lower-class citizens from a young age. This control involves breaking down the traditional family structure within the lower class and implementing government-run daycare facilities for their children.
The quality of education given to the lower class must be of the poorest sort, so that the mode of ignorance isolating the inferior class from the superior classes and remains incomprehensible to the inferior class. With such an initial handicap, even bright lower-class individuals have little if any hope of extricating themselves from their assigned lot in life.
Systematic manipulation and control are considered necessary in order to uphold social order and prevent any unrest or upheaval within the existing societal hierarchy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, when you were last before this committee, we talked about the tens of thousands, it's actually 420,000 unaccompanied migrant children who have come across the border under your watch. We talked about the reports of the number of these children who have been lost, who have been sold into labor trafficking, into sex trafficking. Since your last appearance, the numbers have grown worse. It now approaches 100,000 children, according to public reports, 100,000 children lost by your department and the Biden administration, migrant children sold into labor trafficking and sex trafficking. Now, your Department of Homeland Security Investigations has the authority to do child exploitation investigations. How many of these kids have you gotten back?
Senator, we actually have prioritized the rescue of children who have been human trafficked. Our role in the immigration process is to, with respect to unaccompanied children specifically, is to turn them over under the law within 72 hours to the Department of Health and Human Services, and that is indeed what we do.
But how many of the children, nearly 100,000 children, you've read the New York Times reports, I assume, Mr. Secretary.
I have read many reports, Senator Hawley.
But do you know what I'm talking about with the number of children who have been sent to operate heavy machinery, who are not being paid, who are not going to school, who are being denied food, migrant children unaccompanied, who are now in the clutches of labor traffickers? You're familiar with this, right?
That is precisely why I revised our worksite enforcement.
Good. How many of the kids have you gotten back then? 85,000 or more now. Lost contact with. It's been months since you were last here. How many of those children have you rescued? Can you give me a number?
You are conflating issues.
So you can't give me a number. You haven't rescued any of these children. You haven't gotten any of them back.
You are conflating issues and what is within our remit and what is outside of it.
Okay. Well, it doesn't sound to me like this is a priority, and I have to tell you, that's what your own agents tell me as well. A whistleblower from your Agency of Homeland Security Investigations has come to me and has said that special agents who are working on child trafficking cases and fentanyl interdiction cases have been pulled off of their investigations and sent to the southern border. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these agents at a time, taken out of the field, taken off child exploitation cases, and sent to the southern border. Here's some of what she said. She said, we're being told to shut down investigations, to go hand out sandwiches and escort migrants to the shower and sit with them while they're in the hospital, and those types of tasks. Mr. Secretary, you're taking special agents away from investigating child traffickers and child exploitation when you've lost tens of thousands of kids to traffickers, and you're sending them to make sandwiches at the border. What is going on?
You are incorrect, Senator.
Are there special agents from HSI at the border?
Senator, we have a number of priorities. We prioritize trafficking in children. We prioritize the fight against fentanyl. We prioritize.
Mr. Secretary, you're not answering my question. You're not answering my question. Are there HSI special agents who are currently at the border, having been pulled away from other cases? Yes or no?
Combating the fight against fentanyl, yes.
How many agents are currently at the border, having been pulled off of their other cases?
To fight the scourge of fentanyl, I'd be very pleased to provide you with that data.
That's not what the special agent is alleging. That's not what she said. She said that they're being taken off of fentanyl interdiction, off of child exploitation cases, off of their other investigations into criminals to make sandwiches. That's her quote. You're saying that this is a lie, that she's wrong?
Senator, we have a number of law enforcement priorities with the resources.
Is making sandwiches one of them?
We have, of course not, Senator. We accomplish a tremendous amount.
Is she wrong?
Because of the tremendous talent and dedication of our personnel, including Homeland Security investigations.
Making sandwiches for illegal immigrants. Is she wrong? This is one of your agents. Is she wrong? She says that there are 600 at least special agents pulled off of other cases, sent down to the border to babysit illegal immigrants. Is she wrong?
Senator, our personnel, we use our personnel to achieve the maximum law enforcement objective possible. That is what we do.
So you're not going to deny it?
And I'm incredibly proud of what our people do
every
single day.
This is news. Well, I want to thank this brave whistleblower for coming forward, and let the record reflect that the Secretary will not deny what she has said, that hundreds of special agents are pulled off of their law enforcement duties all around the country, by the way. Her testimony to me is this happens all around the country and sent down to the border to make sandwiches for illegal immigrants. This is your administration in action. It's a total failure, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, thanks for being here. Let's talk about the surge in child smuggling and child exploitation that is happening on your watch. Do you know the number of unaccompanied children who have come across the border on your watch?
Senator, I don't have that number at my disposal, but I can assure you that we are incredibly dedicated to the safety and security of those children.
Well, it doesn't appear so, based on what we're reading today in the New York Times, what we're reading and seeing from numbers from your own office. The answer to my question, by the way, is 345,807. That's the number of unaccompanied children who have come across the border on your watch. Do you know what's happening to these children? Have you seen this report from the New York Times? Alone and exploited migrant children work brutal jobs across the United States. Have you seen this?
Senator, I have, and let me share with you what we are doing.
Have you seen these numbers? These are reports of trafficking and abuse of migrant children. You can see a massive surge that begins to happen when? Oh, when you come to office in 2021. Huge surge, reports of trafficking, reports of neglect and abuse. Let's just look at a few of the details. This is absolutely unbelievable. I can't believe this happens in the United States of America in this day and age. This is from the New York Times. Thousands of children have ended up in punishing jobs across the country, working overnight in slaughterhouses, replacing roofs, operating machinery in factories, all in violation of child labor laws. For example, there's a young girl named Carolina from Guatemala. She is 15 years old. What does she do? She packages Cheerios overnight at a factory. She says, sometimes I get tired and I feel sick. The times goes on, her stomach often hurt. She was unsure if that was because of a lack of sleep or the stress of the incessant roar of the machines or her own worry. The times goes on. Far from home, many of these children are under intense pressure to earn money. They have to send cash back home to their families while often being in debt to their sponsors, quote unquote. For what? For smuggling fees, rent, and living expenses. One individual interviewed by the Times said this, and I'm still quoting, "It's the new child labor. You're taking children from another country and putting them into indentured servitude." I could go on and on. The Times details over a multi-month investigation, kid after kid, child after child. One 13-year-old forced to wash hotel sheets in Virginia. Kids running milking machines in Vermont, delivering meals in New York City, scrubbing dishes late at night, all in violation of our country's laws, all facilitated by your policies. Are you proud of this record?
Senator, the horrific exploitation of children is something that we do not condone. You are incorrectly attributing it to our policies. Let me share with you.
Wait a minute. It began, look at the numbers, It began, this massive surge began when you came to office. In your first year in office, there was a 342% surge of unaccompanied children across the border. You know, CBS reported that, I'm going to quote them now, Mr. Biden's election, as well as policy changes announced by his administration, those would be your changes, led smugglers to tell migrant youth they had a better chance of being allowed to stay in the United States than they had under Trump. Meanwhile, you've lost track of tens of thousands of them. The Times also reviewed data that showed the government couldn't reach more than 85,000 of these children who they just turned over into the hands of smugglers, these are modern day slave traders. And you're just giving these children to them. What is going on? Why are you doing this?
Senator, of course, there are a number of factual inaccuracies in your question, but let me address two lines of effort that we have to combat the scourge of exploitation.
Why don't we just start with why you enabled it? Can we just start with that? Why is it that you have enabled 345,000 children to be smuggled across this border and then sent into the hands of modern-day slave traders? In 2021, you made the decision to change Title 42 to allow unaccompanied children to come into the United States and then to be sent into the interior of the country. Under the last administration, children were reunited with their families in their home country. You changed that, and as soon as you changed it, the numbers exploded. That is your responsibility.
Quite a number of false statements, Senator.
What is false about that statement?
So if I can state what I've been trying to state, one of the significant policy decisions that we have made is to focus our worksite enforcement investigative efforts, our criminal investigative efforts on unscrupulous employers that exploit individuals because of their vulnerabilities, and that includes underage workers.
That is not what the New York Times investigation found. Mr. Chairman, I just ask at this point, I'd like to enter into the record the New York Times article, as migrant children were put to work, U.S. ignored warnings. This is from April 17th, 2023. This is this morning. And I'd also like to enter into the record the New York Times article, Alone and Exploited Migrant Children Work Brutal Jobs Across the U.S. This is from February 25th, 2023. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What these articles show, Mr. Secretary, is that the administration has done nothing but facilitate this crisis. You changed Title 42, you allowed hundreds of thousands of migrant children to come across the border, and then you made it worse. When they became a political crisis for you, when that huge surge of kids across the border because you changed Title 42, when it became an optics crisis, what did you do? You began pressuring officials and agencies to skip the vetting process and get these kids out as soon as possible to sponsors who weren't vetted. Here's the times again. As shelters filled with children, the administration began loosening vetting restrictions and urging case managers to speed the process along. You have at every stage facilitated this modern-day indentured servitude of minor children. Why should you not be impeached for this?
Senator, I look forward to discussing this issue further because you are misstating the facts so terribly.
I am reading you the facts from articles in the news, and your usual modus operandi is what you're doing again today, which is just to deny, deny, deny. Why have you permitted 345,000 children to come into this country unaccompanied? Why have you permitted thousands of them to be abused and exploited?
Senator, what we do is we enforce the law. But let me just say this.
You're not.
It is stunning to me, stunning, to hear you say that the prior administration reunited children with their parents.
Oh, I see. So this is their fault? But you're not going to take any responsibility for the indentured servitude and exploitation of children that is happening on your watch. A moment ago, you were crowing about the fact that you treated children so well, and yet we find tens of thousands of children who are forced to work as slaves because of your policies, and you turn around and blame a prior administration. Mr. Secretary, this is par for the course for you. You do it every time you appear before this committee. You do it every time you appear before Congress. I, for one, am sick and tired of it, and thousands of children are in physical danger because of what you are doing. You should have resigned long ago, and if you cannot change course, you should be removed from office. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad we're having this hearing, and thank you to all of the witnesses. Thank you for being here. I want to visit with you in just a second, but I just want to reiterate something that I heard the chairman say that I agree with, which is that there really ought to be government witnesses sitting there. And I tell you what I'm tired of. I've had Secretary Mayorkas sit in front of me in a different committee, the Homeland Security Committee, where I asked him at length about the outrage of 250,000 migrant children, unaccompanied, crossing the border in the last 2 years, and tens of thousands of them being sold into slavery. Let's not mince words. They've been sold into slavery. When kids are being put into factories, forced to work overnight, forced to work in terrible conditions, they're not getting paid, they're not going to school, sometimes they're not getting fed, that's slavery. And what I heard from Secretary Mayorkas, don't take my word for it, you go look at the record, read the transcript. What he told me was, oh, it's not my problem. We don't have anything to do with it. Not my problem. Now we have a new report from HHS where they say it's not their problem. Amazing how this works. Nobody's responsible. These kids are literally being sold as slaves in the United States of America in the year 2023, and nobody's responsible. They don't want to come and testify to this committee. You bet they don't. They don't want to be put under oath. They don't want to answer any questions. They don't want cameras here. They don't want to take any responsibility. Well, I tell you, it's somebody's fault. It's not the kids' fault. Thank God for the New York Times, phrase I never thought would come out of my mouth. But really, I mean, thank the Lord that the New York Times did these series of reports, because otherwise we'd still be fed the lies from this administration that everything is fine and dandy. We know just where the kids are. It's all great. They're all fine. No, it's not. Is it fine that people like Carolina Yuck, who's 15 years old, I apologize to her if I mispronounced her name, she's one of the folks, one of the young women that the New York Times caught up with. What is she doing? Midnight in Grand Rapids, Michigan, a conveyor belt carrying bags of Cheerios past a cluster of young workers. Carolina, every 10 seconds, has to stuff a sealed plastic bag of cereal into a passing yellow carton. It's dangerous work, fast-moving pulleys and gears that had torn off fingers and ripped open a woman's scalp. The factory was full of underage workers like Carolina who'd crossed the southern border by themselves, vulnerable,
now spending late nights bent over hazardous machinery in violation of child labor laws. Carolina says, sometimes I get tired and feel sick. Her stomach often hurt. She was unsure if that was because of the lack of sleep, the stress from the incessant roar of the machines, or the worries she had for herself and her family in Guatemala. This is totally, utterly, completely unacceptable. And I am sick unto death of this administration coming before this Congress and saying, it's not our fault, we have nothing to do with it, we don't know where they are, the kids are fine, somebody will do it, somebody will get around to it. Ridiculous. Let's look at some of the things that we've learned about what's going on over at HHS that Secretary Becerra is doing. Here's some quotes from employees at HHS. At least 5 Health and Human Services staff members said that they were pushed out after raising concerns about child safety. This is all from the New York Times, by the way. Mr. Becerra told the Office of Refugee Resettlement Director that if she could not increase the number of discharges of children, he'd find somebody who would. Next, 20% of kids have to be released every week or you get dinged. It's a conveyor belt of children being forced through the system. And what's the priority of HHS? Just get them out as fast as we can. They go to factories. They go to slave labor. No. I've written to the FBI and asked the FBI, where are the 80,000 plus children this administration's lost? They don't know. I've said it's your responsibility to go get them. It's a direct violation of child labor laws. They're not doing anything. Nobody's doing anything. It's outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous. And the fact that the administration won't come and sit there and answer questions to this committee is absurd. And it is nothing more than cowardice. They don't want to answer questions. They don't want to be responsible. They don't want to take responsibility for this. So let the record reflect that this administration has let tens of thousands of children be sold into slavery, and they are doing nothing about it. And I hope, Mr. Chairman, I'm glad you said that we would be holding additional hearings. We need to have additional hearings. There need to be administration witnesses there, and we need to figure out what in the world is going on and who's to be held accountable for this. Because I tell you what's not an acceptable answer. It's not acceptable to say, it's not my problem. We wish the kids the best. The kids are in danger. The kids are in slavery. The kids are being exploited. And it should not happen in the United States of America. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for holding this hearing, and I, too, am glad that we're going to have others, because I'm hoping that we'll have bipartisan support not only for enforcement of prohibitions against exploiting child labor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for convening this hearing. This is such a vital hearing on a vital topic, and to be honest with you, this hearing concerns, I think, every parent's nightmare. And I see you're nodding, Mr. Behar. You're a father. That subject composes, that reality composes some of your testimony. I'm also a father of 3. And what you have brought to this committee today is something that every parent in America needs to hear. The numbers are really stunning, that 1 in 4 teenagers, minor children, will experience sexual solicitation on Meta's platforms at some point. 1 in 8 say that they have experienced unwanted sexual advances. We're talking about children now. These are not adults. Children have experienced unwanted sexual advances just in the last week, within the last 7 days. And of course, we know from Meta's own internal research that they knew the extent of this problem even as they were ignoring you. And I want to turn to some of that research that Senator Blumenthal just referenced. Here's what these are Meta's own words from their own internal research on the effect of their own product on children, particularly young women. Quote, "We make body image issues worse for 1 in 3 teen girls." Quote, "Teens blame Instagram for increases in the rate of anxiety and depression. This reaction was unprompted and consistent across all groups." Quote, "Teens told us they don't like the amount of time they spend on the app, but they feel they have to be present. They often feel addicted and know that what they're seeing is bad for their mental health, but feel unable to stop themselves." This is the reality that Meta and Instagram, Facebook, they knew these things were happening. These quotes are years old that I just read. You pointed this out to them too, Mr. Behar, and still they did nothing. In fact, they did worse than nothing. What your testimony shows is when you brought these concerns to them, when you exposed this reality, rather than respond, they cooked the books, if I understand your testimony correctly. They started telling the public, including Congress, and of course every parent in America, that, oh, we get 90% of unwanted sexual material, child sex abuse material, pornography, terrorism threats. We take it down. Our AI systems find it and take it down. But what you expose is, in fact, those AI systems are catching only a small percentage of that kind of abusive material online. So when Facebook is out there promoting to the world, oh, we're taking down the vast majority, it's simply not true. And in fact, they know it's not true, and that statistic is designed to mislead. They are deliberately misleading parents about what's on their platform. They are deliberately misleading parents about the safety of their children online. And I just want to echo something that Senator Blumenthal has said. It is time for Congress to take action. It was time years ago for Congress to take action. It is an indictment of this body, to be honest with you, that we have not acted. And we all know the reason why. If I could just start with a little plain talk here this morning. Big tech is the biggest, most powerful lobby in the United States Congress. They spend millions upon millions upon millions of dollars every year to lobby this body. And the truth is, as every reporter in this room knows, and I hope you'll report it after this hearing, they do it successfully. They successfully shut down every meaningful piece of legislation every year. I've only been here for 4 years, and I have seen it repeatedly in the short time I have been here. We'll get all kinds of speeches in committee. We'll get speeches on the floor about how we have to act, and then this body will do nothing. Why? Money. That's why. Gobs of it. Gobs of it. Influencing votes, a hammerhold on this process. It is time for it to be broken, and the only way I know to break it is to bring the truth forward, and that's why we are so glad, Mr. Behar, that you are here today to do it.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Behar, thank you again for being here. I just want to first establish a fact or two, just to make sure everybody understands. So on October the 5th, 2021, you composed an email, which is now, I think, in the record, to Mark Zuckerberg, Sheryl Sandberg, and a group of other executives at Meta. Am I right so far?
That's correct.
In that memo, you disclosed to them that according to your own research, 1 in 8 children now, had experienced unwanted sexual advances within the last 7 days. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And about 1 in 3, I think it was 27%, had experienced unwanted sexual advances outside of the 7-day window. So that is more than 7 days. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Those numbers are astounding. I just want to let that sink in. 1 in 8 within 7 days, a third of children outside of that window. Mark Zuckerberg, did he reply to you?
He did not reply.
Did he meet with you?
He did not meet with me.
Sheryl Sandberg, did she meet with you?
She did not meet with me.
So, in other words, the people who had recruited you to come back to Facebook, Meta, whatever, it's hard to keep up, they ignored your findings. When you presented data to them they didn't want to see, they turned a blind eye. Let me ask you about something else. This is from the Wall Street Journal's report earlier this year. This is June of this year. They found the following. I'm going to quote. Instagram helps connect and promote a vast network of accounts openly devoted to the commission and purchase of underage sex content. Pedophiles have long used the internet, but unlike the forums and file transfer services that cater to people who have an interest in illicit content, Instagram doesn't merely host these activities. Instagram's algorithms promote them. Instagram connects pedophiles and guides them to content sellers via recommendation systems that excel at linking those who share these interests, the journal and academic researchers found. This is a stunning report, Mr. Behar, that more than buttresses, bears out what you were trying to tell the executives who ignored you. Just give us a sense, in your own view, why do you think this is happening? Why has Instagram become, in the words of the Wall Street Journal, a vast pedophile network? Why are people like your daughter, every time they get on Instagram, they're being bombarded with unwanted sexual advances, sexual content? Why is this happening?
My experience of that is that most of the resources, even close to all that they invest in this, go towards this very narrow definition of harm. And so I would encourage anybody here, when you're looking at this issue, if you find an account that seems to be a pedophile account selling things, try and act on it. try and raise it, see what the company does with that. But see what happens if you like it or follow it, what you start getting recommended, and of all of the things that get surfaced by the systems, how many of them are they acting on? It's a fraction of a percent.
One of the things that you said changed from the time you left Facebook in 2015, I think it was, and came back in 2019, was that Facebook had shifted to an automated-driven process of safety standards, safety inspection, monitoring for things like this, which they boast about. They say that their AI is great, it's doing great work. That doesn't appear, however, to be the actual fact. It appears that these harms are proliferating. Tell us about the shift towards automated safety monitoring and what that has meant in your experience.
I was not there for the shift, but what I can say is that algorithms are as good as their inputs. So if you don't allow a child to be, oh, that is gross, it makes me uncomfortable, right? Which is something that you can do for an ad today. You can take an ad and say, that is sexually inappropriate. But there's no way for a child to do that when they get a message or other areas. How do these systems, like, even have a hope of addressing these issues? How can they, as a company, have a hope of addressing these issues if they're not willing to listen when a teen is trying to tell them that they're experiencing gross content, unwanted sexual advances? I mean, that's how you find predators. That's how you find the bad things.
So what your research found and what you elevated to leadership was, at least in part, that these automated systems were not catching the vast majority of this unwanted content out there. I mean, the sexual advances of this pedophile material, it simply doesn't begin to capture. Yet Facebook didn't shift more resources, didn't change their process. And here's the thing that really gets me, and I'll end with this, Mr. Chairman. I know there's others who want to question. I've been reading over and over and over again this case filed by my home state, Missouri versus Biden. Landmark First Amendment case in which two federal courts, federal district court and a federal court of appeals, have found that Facebook, among others, actively coordinated with the present administration to censor First Amendment protected speech. Not this garbage that is not protected by anything in our Constitution, but First Amendment protected speech. Here's what gets me. What the courts found, this is in the record, this is factual findings, is that Facebook devoted all kinds of resources and people, actual human people, to doing things like monitoring posts on COVID-19 vaccine efficacy. There's one example of a parent in my home state of Missouri who wanted to post something about a school board meeting. Facebook used human moderators to go and take down that post. That was important. That has to come down. We can't have them posting about school board meetings, for heaven's sake. But the things that your daughter experienced, this ring of pedophiles, rings plural, that Facebook just can't find the time for. They just don't have the resources for it. That we just have to leave to, let the market have its effect. Let AI do its job. We just don't have the resources for it. They had plenty of resources to censor First Amendment speech. No resources to protect our children. Absolutely unconscionable. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Behar, thank you for being here, and thank you you have been extraordinarily patient, but also incredibly forthcoming in your responses, and it's just been tremendously helpful. So thank you so much. I just want to come back to something that you've said over and over, because you've been asked about it over and over. To quote you in response to an earlier question, you said that changes to the product, and you were just explaining that Instagram is a product like ice cream or opioids maybe. Changes to the product would be most helpful, but there is no incentive. And by no incentive, I mean, that really just means there's no money in it for the company, right? I mean, isn't that what it gets down to? If they could make money on it, wouldn't they do it?
You're going to have to ask them. I really am I'm very excited for the day that Mark or Adam are sitting here.
Me too.
And then you can ask them, so why did you not invest? Because one of the things that is in each recommendation you see there, do you understand what data is causing these things? Like, here's the button that you can build in the systems. Those are not a matter of significant investment. It would not cost them as much. It is a matter of how much they prioritize the work and whether they're willing to set their goals based on what teens are experiencing.
I think that's very well said. And, I would just add this. You commented earlier that it would be great to hear Mark Zuckerberg say, we made $34 billion this quarter.
that was hypothetical you threw out, and then here I also have to report, here's the amount of harm that teenagers suffered. I'd tell you what else I'd love to hear him say. We made $34 billion this quarter, and we have $34 billion in jury judgments pending against us. That would get their attention. And I just have to say, at the end of the day, if you want to incentivize changes to these companies, you have got to allow people to sue them. You've got to open up the courtroom doors. The FTC fined Facebook, what was $1 billion or something a couple of years ago. It made no discernible difference to their business practices. None. They changed nothing. They don't care. But I tell you what they fear. They fear parents going into court and holding them accountable. That's the hammer. That's what happened with big tobacco. That's what happened with opioids. That's the hammer. And that's what we have got to do. And so I'll just say this. You know, we've talked about the bills that have passed this committee. One of them is Senator Durbin's bill, along with me. It's our bill together on child sexual exploitation, abuse material, CSAM, exploitative material. And for my money, the best part about that bill is it contains a private right of action. So I'll just say this. It's November, I think, the 7th today. Is that right? I'll make you a pledge. We're going to vote before the end of the year. Before the end of this calendar year, I will go to the floor of the United States Senate, and I will demand a vote on the bills that we have passed in this committee. And we'll just find out. We're going to put people on record. Because I'm tired of waiting. I've waited 4 years. Many folks in this committee have waited far longer. So we're going to vote. Any senator can go to the floor and call up a piece of legislation and ask for a vote on it. And I'm going to do it. Before the end of this year, I'm going to do it. So we're going to find out. We have all this talk about, oh, we love it, we need to do stuff. Okay, fine, let's do something. And the other thing I just say is on the money that is flowing into this capital from big tech is obscene. It's totally obscene. And if we really wanted to change something, we'd get the corporate money out of politics. We would stop these mega corporations from making political contributions. That would change things.
Don Juan elaborated to Carlos Castaneda on the theory that human beings are ensnared as captives of a powerful cosmic predator. This mysterious entity is deemed our ultimate lord and master, rendering us submissive and feeble. It silences our objections and dictates that we relinquish our autonomy. Viewing us as mere sustenance, the predator cruelly squeezes us in its grip. According to sorcerers, these predators have bestowed upon us our intricate systems of beliefs, notions of morality, and societal norms. They cunningly manipulate our aspirations, ideals, and fantasies while implanting seeds of greed, envy, and fear. In essence, it is the insidious effects of these predators that wield ultimate control over us, rendering us obedient and complacent.
There was a very rich magician who owned a large number of sheep, but he was also very mean. Rather than hiring shepherds or putting up a fence, he let his sheep roam freely, leading to many unfortunate accidents. The sheep were aware that the magician wanted to use them for their flesh and skins, so they often tried to escape. To solve this problem, the magician hypnotized his sheep, convincing them that they were immortal and that being skinned was actually a pleasant experience. He also made them believe that he was a kind master who truly cared for them. With these suggestions in mind, the sheep no longer resisted and trusted that no harm would come to them. Through the power of hypnosis, the magician was able to control his flock and prevent them from running away.
The following is a quote from Operations Research Technical Manual TW SW 7905.1.
After thorough contemplation of the ethical implications, it was concluded that individuals who neglect to utilize their intellect are akin to animals. Consequently, an intricate strategy was devised to clandestinely launch a crusade against the American population with the aim of reallocating wealth from the careless majority to the conscientious minority. This malevolent plot involved the utilization of silent weapons, subtle and sophisticated tools engineered to achieve the desired result. The ultimate objective was to establish a fresh global hierarchy founded on the principles of self-discipline and accountability, ensuring tranquility and prosperity for the selected few.
Everything that is expected from an ordinary weapon is expected from a silent weapon by its creators, but only in its own manner of functioning. It shoots situations, instead of bullets, propelled by data processing, instead of chemical reaction, explosion, originating from bits of data, instead of grains of gunpowder, from a computer, instead of a gun, operated by a computer programmer, instead of a marksman, under the orders of a banking magnate, instead of a military general. It makes no obvious explosive noises, causes no obvious physical or mental injuries, and does not obviously interfere with anyone's daily social life. Yet it makes an unmistakable noise, causes unmistakable physical and mental damage, and unmistakably interferes with the daily social life, i.e., unmistakable to a trained observer, one who knows what to look for. The public cannot comprehend this weapon, and therefore cannot believe that they are being attacked and subdued by a weapon. The public might instinctively feel that something is wrong, but that is because of the technical nature of the silent weapon. They cannot express their feeling in a rational way, or handle the problem with intelligence. Therefore, they do not know how to cry for help, and do not know how to associate with others to defend themselves against it. When a silent weapon is applied gradually, the public adjusts/adapts to its presence and learns to tolerate its encroachment on their lives until the pressure, psychological via economic, becomes too great and they crack up. Therefore, the silent weapon is a type of biological warfare. It attacks the vitality, options, and mobility of the individuals of a society by knowing, understanding, manipulating, and attacking their sources of natural and social energy, and their physical, mental, and emotional strengths and weaknesses. The social welfare program is nothing more than an open-ended credit balance system which creates a false capital industry to give non-productive people a roof over their heads and food in their stomachs. This can be useful, however, because the recipients become state property in return for the gift, a standing army for the elite. For he who pays the piper picks the tune. Those who get hooked on the economic drug must go to the elite for a fix. In this, the method of introducing large amounts of stabilizing capacitance is by borrowing on the future credit of the world. This is a fourth law of motion onset, and consists of performing an action and leaving the system before the reflected reaction returns to the point of action, a delayed reaction. The means of surviving the reaction is by changing the system before the reaction can return. By this means, politicians become more popular in their own time and the public pays later. In fact, the measure of such a politician is the delay time. The same thing is achieved by a government by printing money beyond the limit of the gross national product, an economic process called inflation. This puts a large quantity of money into the hands of the public and maintains a balance against their greed, creates a false self-confidence in them and, for a while, stays the wolf from the door. They must eventually resort to war to balance the account, because war ultimately is merely the act of destroying the creditor, and the politicians are the publicly hired hitmen that justify the act to keep the responsibility and blood off the public conscience. See section on consent factors and social economic structuring. If the people really cared about their fellow man, they would control their appetites, greed, procreation, etc., so that they would not have to operate on a credit or welfare social system which steals from the worker to satisfy the bum. Since most of the general public will not exercise restraint, there are only two alternatives to reduce the economic inductance of the system. Let the populace bludgeon each other to death in war, which will only result in total destruction of the living earth. Take control of the world by the use of economic silent weapons in a form of quiet warfare and reduce the economic inductance of the world to a safe level by a process of benevolent slavery and genocide. The latter option has been taken as the obviously better option. At this point, it should be crystal clear to the reader why absolute secrecy about the silent weapons is necessary. The general public refuses to improve its own mentality and its faith in its fellow man. It has become a herd of proliferating barbarians, and, so to speak, a blight upon the face of the earth. They do not care enough about economic science to learn why they have not been able to avoid war despite religious morality, and their religious or self-gratifying refusal to deal with earthly problems renders the solution of the earthly problem unreachable to them. It is left to those few who are truly willing to think and survive as the fittest to survive, to solve the problem for themselves as the few who really care. Otherwise, exposure of the silent weapon would destroy our only hope of preserving the seed of the future true humanity.
Motors on, everyone's John, and everyone's John, and everyone's John. To take your money, to take your soul, they can't your advices. You need to check your blessings, cause your advices. You need to check your blessings and your advices. Your old eyes,
Mr. Speaker, and to my friend from Missouri, thank you. Actually, sometimes I come behind these microphones and often what I want to share, what I need to share, it's my therapy, is a bit dour. And it's sometimes fun to listen to someone that actually has happy and joyous. All right, now that the uplifting portion of this program is over, let's get to the facts. Mr. Speaker, or now Madam Speaker Pro Tem, you see the number, 35 trillion. Guess when we hit it? We should be very, very excited and proud of ourselves. We did something that so many economists said we would never get to this quick. My math says this coming Friday, 3 p.m., the United States gross debt will cross over 35 trillion. Now understand, that's not the way Europeans calculate our debt, which they calculate our debt dramatically higher because of our obligated unfunded liabilities. But you're going to watch the Treasury Friday about 3 p.m. post up a number, $35 trillion. We did it. Congratulations. And how many people have you heard come find the microphone today or this week understanding, wanting to talk about that? What we've gotten is people coming behind the microphone and not telling the truth. We all want to protect Social Security. The way you protect Social Security is you know the math and how it actually works. We're on track in a decade to double senior poverty. But God forbid any of us tell the truth about math, because the truth gets you unelected and a bunch of really angry ads at home. So this place runs around and avoids telling the truth. So let's walk through another little factoid. My math basically says this year, 45.68% of all the income tax collections, receipts, your government takes in just cover the cost of interest. I'd been coming behind the microphone and saying, hey, interest in 2024, this fiscal year, would be somewhere around a little less than 1.2 trillion. I apparently have that wrong. It's probably going to come in about $1,140 to $60 billion. Either way, I'm off a fraction. But 45.68% of every dime we're collecting in your income tax now just pays interest. And I've tried to say over and over and over at home and other places, and you get people to just stare at you and go, huh? Who really runs this government? Seriously, it's an honest question. I need you to think like adults. Maybe those who actually went to a finance class. Who actually now runs this government? I'm going to argue the debt markets, the bond markets from around the world. If you have to bring almost $10 trillion to market this fiscal year, $2.25 trillion virgin new issues because we're borrowing, that's like $75,000 to $80,000 a second right now. And the economy is good. The actual baseline data on GDP is good, and you're still burning almost $80,000 a second in borrowing. What happens the second you have a U.S. debt auction that's undersubscribed or there's not enough people there? What happens to U.S. interest rates? How much of the world goes into depression? But we're going to talk about that. Oh, God, no, because that would require math. That would require being serious. You know, we passed a bill here earlier today. I voted no on it. And look, they worked hard on it. They lowered the top line spending. But you got to deal with a really uncomfortable discussion. Every dime a member of Congress votes on is borrowed. Okay, let's process that. Every dime a member of Congress votes on is borrowed, and depending on some of the projections, about a quarter of Medicare. Social Security has its own trust fund. It runs out in like 9-10 years. And then we got to figure out what's going to happen there. And we can continue to get Democrats coming behind the microphone and lying about it, which makes it almost impossible to actually lay out the math and try to fix it. And remember, raising the cap, doing the Democrats' plan of $400,000 up and just raising the cap only covers about 38% of the shortfall. You had the president in that debate last month saying, if we just tax rich people 1% more. And I have a chart in here that will show it's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the shortfall. Remember, if you take $400,000 and up, the Democrats' definition of rich, and you tax them at 12.4%, you only cover 38% of the shortfall. So 1%. And this is the nature of our discussion. When every dime a member of Congress votes on is borrowed, is it moral to borrow money here to send it to entities around the country, even though their programs, many of them I love. I think they're the right thing. I just think the way we finance it isn't. Is it right to send them cash to that city, to that state, to that county, and they have their own taxing authority? They may have more cash in the bank than we do as a percentage. Do you borrow money? Because that's what we're doing today. We're borrowing money. And the crazy thing, when you do the adjustment for the ability for interest to be tax exempt from municipal debt, we have municipalities in this country that have a better credit rating, than the United States. Remember, Greece can sell a 10-year bond cheaper than the United States today. We are number 14 on the credit stack, meaning there's 13 other countries that can sell a 10-year bond cheaper than the United States. And if you read the instruments, if you read the Moody's, the S&Ps, their documents and their reps and warrants and their analysis on U.S. debt, they don't trust this place. They do not believe Congress, particularly, because it's our job. We're supposed to be the adults in the room. We make policy. The White House carries it out. Remember that little thing, the Constitution? Maybe someone tried reading it. And they don't trust us. They don't, and they have no reason to trust us. How much discussion have you heard, anyone who's been listening to these microphones this week? Heard people like me, which maybe I'm just an idiot for actually giving a damn. Get behind these microphones and actually walk through the math and explain there's a way we keep our promises. There's a way we meet our obligation for the earned benefits. There's a way to make this work. You don't have a lot more time to keep screwing around, but if you do it in the next 3-4 years, this is another American century. I have my 8-year-old sitting over here. I also have a 2-year-old. My wife's exactly my age. Yes, I'm pathologically optimistic. The math says her generation will be the first generation to live poorer than her parents. Great morality, guys. Very proud of us. And anyone that listens to my diatribes here, thank you. I think this is almost like my therapy session, because I get angry all week long listening to absurdity and people saying things that mathematically have no basis in fact. 100% of the debt, and this makes everyone angry, and it's factual. 100% of the U.S. debt from today through the next 30 years is demographics. Huh? What's demographics? And this is your country's leadership. It's demographics. We got old as a society and we didn't set aside the resources to keep our promises. And since 1990, U.S. fertility has been falling. I won't use the word collapsing. But last year, we estimate 2023, 1.63%, maybe 1.62% fertility, meaning the United States now has fewer children than much of Europe. Now tell me how I build a pay-as-you-go system to keep our promises to those who paid into Social Security, those who paid into Medicare. And remember, the Medicare taxes you pay only cover about 38, 40%. And there is, okay. Oh, what the hell? Why not we do this right now? Social Security does not add to the U.S. debt, technically. But the paying back the money that was borrowed from the Social Security Trust Fund does. So there's some $3 trillion some dollars that have been borrowed out. And for the last few years, every month, there's not enough tax collections coming in on the FICA tax at 12.4% to make the payments to Social Security recipients. So every month, I want you just to visualize this. Social Security says, hey, Treasury, I'm holding a bunch of your bonds. You owe us some money. And they cash them in, and Treasury goes and borrows money and pays interest for that borrowed money. So Social Security doesn't create the debt, but Treasury does, because Treasury has to go out and borrow money to pay back the money they've taken out of the Social Security Trust Fund. And if you add it all up, plus interest, and forgive me, I'm partially doing this off the top of my head, I calculate maybe $6 trillion. Three plus in principal, and then over the time the interest paid back is probably another 3. How many times have you had anyone just try to be honest about it? It's not Republican math, it's not Democrat math, it's just math to be avoided because we're terrified of our voters, to tell them the truth, because we've lied to them for so long. How many times have you had a Democrat go around here saying, if we just tax rich people more? I've done entire presentations here, and for those on the Republican side, if we just cut discretionary spending, well, damn it, I can come up with about $300 billion in discretionary can be cut down. They'll be screaming, but that's still 1% of GDP. And for the Democrats, every tax hike they genuinely propose that could be executed when you adjust it for its economic effects would be about 1.5% of GDP. So you got 1.5 there on tax hikes, you got 1% in cuts over here. Hey, it's a big 2.5%, right? Right? 2.5%. We're borrowing 7% of the entire economy this year. Great job, guys. And I guess part of my anger is I love some of the people I work with here. They're smart, they care, but they run away from me when they see me coming because I want to talk about this stuff. This chart is the pie chart of America's spending. Do you see this number? 74% is in the red. The red doesn't get a vote from a member of Congress. That is on autopilot. It's called mandatory. It's earned benefits. Some of the benefits you get because you're part of a certain tribal group or you fall below a certain income, but this is earned. You see the blue? It's defense and non-defense. Every dime in defense is borrowed. Every dime of what we call non-defense discretionary is borrowed. And a wedge of this over here is borrowed. And when you see over here, when we say net interest, I've tried to explain the net difference between net interest and gross interest. Net interest this year will be $892 billion. That's interest we pay to people out in the world. Your pension fund, a nice family on the other side of the world, the union retirement fund over here. They buy U.S. debt. The other debt is we owe to the trust funds. We've borrowed the money from the trust funds, but we still have to pay it back. We still have to pay it interest. So it's one of the great cons we do in our budgeting here is, well, its gross interest is only $890 billion, Schweikert. Why do you keep going around saying 1.2 trillion? Interest just this year. It's because that other chunk of interest we got to pay. And we're going to have to pay back the principal, just as I just did the explanation on how Social Security works. So once again, if you're a member of Congress and you're doing a town hall or putting out something and you're not showing this chart, you're not helping our brothers and sisters across the country understand how serious this election is, how serious putting people in office that stop pandering to your need for a dopamine hit in your brain, but maybe own a calculator. Once again, I can make this math work, but you don't pretend we can tax rich people. We can just cut our way there. You may have to do a bit of both of those, but it's policy. I've done presentation after presentation after presentation on how you could crash healthcare, how you could adopt artificial intelligence to reduce the size of this government dramatically and still have better customer service. How the mechanics of talent-based immigration could actually grow the economy, but shutting down the border, stopping importing competition to our working poor, making our working poor poorer. But you got to think like an economist, and the idiot, the folks here want to talk down to you, talk to you like you're a child, and say, well, if we just did this, we'd be fine. It doesn't work that way. We are now so upside down debt-wise that unless you do something it's holistic with lots of moving parts, none of the math works. And we're uncomfortable telling that truth. So let's actually walk through a board I don't think I've ever shown before. Fiscal year 2024, here's sort of where we're at to date. We've taken in $3,755 billion. Do you see the red here? Okay, the red is the individual income tax. Your country is an income tax-based economic system, where other countries may rely more on a value-added tax, which is a really regressive tax, crushes particularly the middle class. The blue over here, when you start to look at that, this is functionally, we call it social insurance and retirement programs. It's Social Security. Well, that's actually going out the door immediately, and we have to borrow some to cover it. The blue over here, well, that's actually corporate income taxes. Remember, the United States, back in about the late 80s, early 90s, we changed much of our corporate tax structure when we started having pass-throughs. Do you remember LLCs, subchapter S's, partnerships, those things? So much of what is corporate activity in the United States flows through to that individual tax line. So when you get the brain trust here, it says, we're just going to raise corporate taxes. Great. Okay. And that's going to solve something? Remember, and we're trying to vet the paper I got the math from. But we have a paper from about a year and a half ago that said in the 2017 tax reform we did, 67% of the corporate tax rate reduction went to wages. So when you have someone from the left who runs around here saying, we're going to raise corporate taxes, ta-da, what they're doing is basically screwing over the working men and women of the country. That's how it works. When your wages go up, the old saying used to be it's inflation. Well, that doesn't get you anything. Or it's productivity. Because you built a tax code that said we can afford to buy the next better piece of equipment. We can build better processes. We can build better supply chains. We're becoming more productive, and you as a worker get part of that. But part of that productivity also is a tax system that maximizes economic vitality. Economic growth is moral. If you want to have fewer poor people in your society. If you want to close income inequality, you do it not through transfer payments. We have data over data over data that many of the transfer payments at the end of the decade make people poorer because you disassociate them, their lives, from being part of the society, part of work. So the secret is have an economy that grows, that needs them. It's getting economics right is moral. But this is the reality. When you get people, when we start talking about, do you see these tiny little wedges there? Well, that's excise taxes. Some will think of it as tariffs. When you actually see some miscellaneous, your society is functionally financed. Income tax, this is FICA, and this is corporate. Mark my words, and I'll probably be long gone from this place. What the Democrats are doing, policy-wise, and honestly, the Republicans' unwillingness to actually do tough things, into this decade, you're going to all be having a discussion of having a national VAT, value-added tax, just like the rest of the world. And all the crap discussion of, well, it's not progressive enough, it's regressive, it hurts working men and women. Working men and women are going to get their heads kicked in because it's the only way you can start to confiscate enough resources from people. So let's actually talk through, let's knock down some of the craziness that keeps being said around here. This is a brand new chart for me. U.S. fiscal dynamics, now and then. And we're going to go way back. Let's actually do the previous from 1984 to 2023 and then current. Our tax revenues are up. We're taking in more receipts. Technically, they're not revenues. Revenues are what you earn. Receipts are what you confiscate. So just a bit of tax lingo there. But it's our spending. You see tax receipts are up, but our spending is way up. And when you see the white line over here, deficits, it's just basically the derivative of, hey, tax receipts are up, but we're spending faster than those receipts are going up. Therefore, you get a deficit. If you get someone who says, well, those 2017 tax cuts, no, tax receipts are up. I have another chart I'm going to show you here. Corporate tax rates, or corporate tax collections, don't think about the rate, it's about what you take in, are actually above the mean. And how much of this spending is the Orwellian-named Inflation Reduction Act? So the Democrats lost their mind when we did 2017 tax reform. Remember, it was actually a few $1 trillion, $5.5 trillion. But functionally, 4 of it were also covered, direct taxes. We just moved things around to maximize productivity. It was about getting companies to move back to the United States, move their organizations, their intellectual property, the things they were making money on, get them back to the United States. We had to become competitive in the world again. The other $1.5 trillion, well, that's actually, the Democrats, that's the driver of the debt. No, it's not, because it turns out it wasn't $1.5 trillion. The latest data is almost $900 billion of that has been covered by the economic growth. Yet, when the Democrats controlled this place in the last session, they dropped $2 trillion in subsidies, handouts to big business. And all that's borrowed money. How many people, when was the last time you had a reporter that actually covered any of this fairly? When was the last time you met a reporter that owned a calculator? The public has no understanding what's going on out there. And I keep trying to provide this chart over and over. This is U.S. government revenues. The sign should say receipts. This is mislabeled. Green, individual income taxes. Remember, we're mostly an individual income tax country. When you see spikes like this is the dot-com bubble of functionally 1999 or 2000, 2001. The dot-coms, that's capital gains. Here, this spike here, that's actually functioning people were getting lots of COVID money. So it was direct spend from the federal government. We borrowed it, gave it to them. They had to pay taxes on it. This line here, the blue, that's FICA taxes. That's your Social Security, that's your Medicare. Very stable. Down here, this is corporate taxes. Do you see the line? Remember, this is the regime of the new corporate tax rate since 2017. Tax receipts, the actual tax dollars are up. And it's above the mean of the last couple decades. You need vitality. You need dynamism. And there's lots of things we could do policy-wise. The United States is becoming a bit more oligopoly. Many of our businesses are becoming far too big and far too protectionist. But that's government. Government likes big organizations because they're easier to manipulate to get them to do what they want. Hey, here's a subsidy. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Engage in our social policy, engage in our political policy, and we're going to hand you billions. Instead of what you do when you do tax reform of everyone, knife fight, battle it out. The best product, the most dynamic company, the one that moves fastest, the most innovative wins. That's the way an American economy, a market economy is supposed to work. Instead, now you have and you'll actually have our brothers and sisters on the left here actually go behind these microphones and use, our industrial policy is this. Our planned economy is this. God, I keep waiting for them to build a 5-year plan and hold up the little red cards. You don't get that reference, go look it up. So, this is the driver of the debt. Remember I showed you tax receipts are up, but our spending is up more? Well, where's that spending? It's in what we call mandatory. In many ways, this isn't Republican or Democrat. It's what we are as a society. We calculate in about 10 years, 23% of our population will be 65 and up. But the politics will weaponize that very sentence I just gave you, but it's math. It's what we are. It's demographics. We're having dramatically fewer children than have for the last couple decades, and we got older. If we tell the truth about that, we can look at what is the cost driver. So when you get folks that come and say, well, almost all the cost driver is interest and healthcare costs. And a decade from now, when the Social Security Trust Fund is gone, do we backfill it? So the brain trust here will say, well, let's do this. We'll do the ACA, Obamacare, or the Republican alternative, or Medicare for all. Those are financing bills. Once again, if our body here would tell the truth, that's who gets subsidized and who has to pay. They don't change what we pay. Technology, cures, disruptions, better ways to do it. But we keep much of the technology that could crash the price of healthcare here, we keep it illegal. Because there's armies of lobbyists in our hallways who don't want to compete against your ability to use technology to keep yourself and your family healthier. I've been able to attach a handful of AI and algorithm bills to provide customer service at the IRS or the VA or other things. And the hate we've gotten from the government employees unions, from these. But the fact of the matter is, it's moral. It would be better customer service for our constituents. It would be faster, better, cheaper. And the fact of the matter is, there's no pension with it. There are solutions that's not tax or cut and burn. It's a policy. And this place won't engage in the policy because we're afraid of the... We are protectionists. We are protections of the government bureaucracies and the incumbent business models. Is that Republican or Democrat? It's math. Oh. Yeah, I'm not going to bother you with that. Madam Speaker Pro Tem, may I ask how much time I have?
Gentleman has 23 minutes remaining.
All right. And for those who are trying to take down my words, I'm sorry for talking so fast. Tax revenues projected billions of dollars. I'm just, once again, want to make the point. Individual income taxes, projected to be up dramatically. Payroll taxes up fairly substantially. Corporate income taxes fairly healthy, just that they're staying within. Other types of receipts are also up. But where I really want to get back to is trying to make this point, and then we're going to do some actual tax history. This is from CBO, Congressional Budget Office. This is not Republican or Democrat, it's math. 100% of the next 30 years of debt, healthcare and interest, and then in 10 years if we backfill Social Security. The rest of the budget is calculated to have almost $9 trillion positive balance. So when was the last time this place actually was willing to have one of the most difficult discussions? About a month and a half ago, the joint economic economists on the Republican side took the leap and told the truth. We wrote a detailed report about demographics, tax policy, maximizing economic growth, and then we talked about health. And this is where I get the crap kicked out of me, telling the truth. Obesity in the detailed line item, and we spent months and months and months and months working on these numbers and vetting them, could be as high as $9.1 trillion of additional healthcare costs over the 10 years. Having a society where we're about to have the 5th year in a row where prime-age males are dying younger, is that moral? Having a society where we calculate in 3 to 4 years, 50% of America will be obese. Is that moral? What we do in the Farm Bill, what we do in nutrition support, and what we do in trying to have a healthier society, is that Republican or Democrat? I often accuse my Democrats of wanting to engage in policy to maintain people's misery, where those of, at least myself, I want to cure the misery. I want to end the misery, cure diseases, move the types of investment, but also the policies so the FDA can use technology to bring cures to market faster. We have a whole portfolio of these ideas. Not one of those was a tax, not one of those was a major cut. We calculate that 16% of all U.S. health care, $600 billion, is people not staying on their statin or taking their insulin properly or their calcium inhibitors, so they're having a stroke. So 99-cent pill bottle cap that beeps at you. And I can't get a damn hearing on that for years. Simple ideas that could crash the price of health care. Our society is dying. In 15 years, we calculate we have more deaths than births. Oh, but that doesn't work in the next election. That's not what I'm going to use in my propaganda. The attack ads that are going to come at you, Schweikert, well, we're going to say you mentioned the word Social Security and Medicare, but we're going to lie that you're one of the few idiots here trying to find a mathematical way to save it. This place is absolutely immoral. Oh, I've done this before. I've tried to walk through the actual cost to the poor on what we're doing at our border. I'll do this quickly. You're the individual, you're the couple. You didn't finish high school. What you sell is your talents. You're willing to go out and hang drywall. You work yourself off as hard as you can. And then you get a White House that engages in border policy where millions of people with the same skill set as you have come in and they consume the housing stock. So you want to know why the lowest tiers, the least expensive housing has had some of the highest inflation, why they can't find a place to live, and now their wages are going down because you're competing against millions of people with the same skill set. The cruelty of the current border policy crushes the working poor. Can we have a discussion like economists instead of, well, you're immoral, you want to, no. And on the flip side, we have entire charts that talk about a talent-based immigration. And talent could be a skilled carpenter or a synthetic biologist, grows the economy. And I will argue a number of the economic policies I propose, I cannot make work math-wise unless we actually. Because in the 70s, 80s, the world fought for hydrocarbons. Last decade, we fought for rare earths. I can build you the math model that says this decade and the next 3 decades, we're going to fight for smart people. The entire world. We educate people here and then we send them away. Are we out of our minds? Madam Speaker Pro Tem, I'm going to skip a bunch of the boards and just try to close this out with just a couple more. This is 2023. Total outlays, total spending, 6.1 trillion. Total receipts, 4.4 trillion. So what is that? 1.7 trillion borrow. This year, borrowing is going to be about 2.25. And this is a time where the economy is doing remarkably well. Now it's subsidized, so it's basically a sugar high, but it's still doing well. And now our problem is, in 2023, gross interest was about 700 billion. This year we're heading towards $1 trillion, $140, $160 billion. But this differential here, almost every dime of that 1.7 trillion borrowing, the growth on it. Now, much of it is Inflation Reduction Act, the shortfall from tax reform, but we've never been given the run to show how it's growing tax receipts. And I've shown you even corporate tax receipts with the different rates are up. Turns out it's healthcare and interest now. And now as we're moving back to more normalized interest, how many of you live in a fantasy world where you think interest rates are going back to zero? You realize the current interest on 10-year notes still aren't at historic norms when you take away the years of suppression on the rate. And for my brothers and sisters on the left who like to say, well, it was you gave away to rich people. Today, the rich, as defined by you, pay a higher percentage of federal income taxes than they did before. The Republican tax reform was more progressive than the previous tax code. And when we get to some of the other charts, here's my chart showing that President Biden in the debate said something insane about covering Social Security. Let's see if I can find 10 years gross debt will be 56.8 trillion. But here's one of the points I desperately want to make. Historically, when we've had very high marginal rates, we get 17.6, 18, 18.2% of GDP in taxes. When we've had very low marginal rates, we get 17.6, 18.2% of the economy in taxes because the economy changes and grows. So when you look at it, the black line is receipts, revenue. The line above it is interest and healthcare. So when our friends keep saying, well, we're going to tax the rich more, great, but I've already shown you if every tax worked absolutely to its maximum efficiency, you get 1.5% of GDP, and we're borrowing 7 this year. Oh. We'll make this the last one. Until we're actually willing to first have the same definitions of here's the drivers of debt, here's the innovations we're willing to bring into our society. This is our future. Our future is just absolutely crushing. And it's percentages of GDP. We expect Social Security and Medicare outlays as we start to head to the 30-year budget. 17.6% of the entire economy, where revenues are 6.3. Okay, no one has any idea what you're talking about. But my basic point is, today through the next 30 years, it's demographics. It's mostly healthcare, and then the cost of financing that shortfall. Helping people live longer, live healthier, live freer of disease is moral. Is it Republican moral, Democrat moral? It's just moral. And yet, every piece of legislation I've brought here over the last few years can't get a hearing or gets shot down because the bureaucracy despises it. The interest groups care more about their money than they care about my 8-year-old's future. There is a path where the math can be made to work. But for everyone around here, you think there's a simple solution. My father used to have this great solution, this saying, for every complex problem, there's a simple solution. That's absolutely wrong. We will have to do complexity. To save our future, save my retirement, save my children. We have put it on paper. We've done economic modeling. We've had multiple PhD economists do the math. There's a way it works. Will this place step up and buy a calculator, put batteries in it, and then sit down with those of us who want to save our future and make this another American century? But we run around terrified from doing what's hard. Madam Speaker, thank you for the therapy session of letting me vent. I'm going to bite my tongue from saying what I had to say, but I am going to throw one last thing. There's a number of people who watch these presentations on YouTube. Half the comments are bots. They're fake. They're Russian troll farms. Half the remaining half are people who care more about saying ideological insanity. But there's about a quarter of them that help, that actually have sometimes brilliant ideas, are engaged in saying, what if you did this? What if you looked at that? We're diving into ideas on things of consolidation, things of mandatory, and those ideas actually came from the population that's been willing to watch these presentations over the years. And one of my last great hopes is when I would do these economic presentations 5 years ago, I get 12 people that would watch them. Today I'll have several 100,000. Maybe, just maybe, our Democrat, our Republicans, the people who are independent are tired of being treated like children, and they're ready. They're ready for us to start talking to them like honest brokers of policy. And with that, Madam Speaker, I'm going to yield a couple minutes to Congressman Mooney, and he can consume what time I have left.
And so I was sort of raised in the Puerto Rican community at home.
More than half the women in my cabinet, more than half the people in my cabinet, more than half of the women in my administration are women. We have 1,000 billionaires in America. You know the average tax rate they pay? 8, E-I-G-H%. 8%. I hibernated in a while, Iowa for a while, but if I can digress for just a second. Last night I was on television. I was on the telephone. And she was forced to have to travel out of the state to Indiana to seek to terminate the presidency and maybe save her life. That last part is my judgment. So the best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway.
Yeah, so here's President Biden. All right, this one I'm going to ask you about.
You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-cop. You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-democracy. You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-American. Donald Trump lacked the courage to act. The brave women and men in blue all across this nation should never forget that.
So what did you think of this one?
He didn't blink.
Not at all, right?
So that suggests it's fake.
This one's actually real. How's that? This was actually a speech he gave.
That's right, Margaret. It's f***ing real. And it's number 29 on the list. The original video from July 2022 is an 11-minute long pre-recorded address to the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. In it, Joe Biden doesn't blink for long stretches of time, including this portion where he doesn't blink for an entire minute. In fact, during the entire 11-minute and 14-second video, Joe Biden is only seen blinking a total of 40 times. And as stated earlier, the speech wasn't shot in one take. Let's watch Biden's eyes between cuts in the video.
All of these steps will reduce crime and prevent crime from happening in the first place. And
So you're now no longer are you necessarily keeping those private files in some file cabinet that's locked in the basement of the house. It's on your laptop, and it's then therefore up here in this cloud that exists above us, right? It's no longer in a physical place.
Prices have gone up, and families and individuals are dealing with the realities of that bread costs more, that gas costs more. And we have to understand what that means. That's about the cost of living going up. That's about having to stress and stretch limited resources. That's about a source of stress for families that is not only economic, but is on a daily level, something that is a heavy weight to carry.
We'll have an economy based on wind. I never understood wind. You know, I know windmills very much. I've studied it better than anybody. I know it's very expensive. They're made in China and Germany mostly. Very few made here, almost none. But they're manufactured tremendous, if you're into this, tremendous fumes, gases are spewing into the atmosphere. You know, we have a world, right? So the world is tiny compared to the universe. So tremendous amount of fumes and everything. You talk about the carbon footprint, fumes are spewing into the air, right? Spewing. Whether it's in China, Germany, it's going into the air, it's our air, their air, everything, right? So they make these things, and then they put them up. And if you own a house within vision of some of these monsters, your house is worth 50% of the price. They're noisy. They kill the birds. You want to see a bird graveyard? You just go. Take a look. A bird graveyard? Go under a windmill someday. You'll see more birds than you've ever seen ever in your life. You know, in California, they were killing the bald eagle. If you shoot a bald eagle, they want to put you in jail for 10 years. A windmill will kill many bald eagles. It's true. And you know what? After a certain number, they make you turn the windmill off. That's true, by the way. They make you turn it off after you. And yet, if you killed one, they put you in jail. That's okay. But why is it okay for these windmills to destroy the bird population? And that's what they're doing. I'll tell you another thing about windmills. And look, I like all forms of energy. And I think really they're okay in industrial areas, like you have an industrial plant, you put up a windmill, you know, et cetera, et cetera. I've seen the most beautiful fields, farms, most gorgeous things you've ever seen. And then you have these ugly things going up. And sometimes they're made by different companies. You know, I'm like a perfectionist. I really built good stuff. And so you'll see like a few windmills made by one company, General Electric. And then you'll see a few made by Siemens. And you'll see a few made by some other guy that doesn't have 10 cents. It looks like so you see all these windmills. They're all different shades of color. They're like sort of white, but one's like an orange white. It's my favorite color, orange. And you see these magnificent fields, and they're ruined. And you know what they don't tell you about windmills? After 10 years, they look like hell. You know, they start to get tired, old. You got to replace them. A lot of times people don't replace them. They need massive subsidy from the government in order to make it. No, we're doing it right. We're doing it right. And you know, our numbers environmentally right now are better than they've ever been before, just so you know. Because I'm an environmentalist, I am. I want the cleanest water on the planet. I want the cleanest air.
Defending a system that's general. So high, but motors on, everyone's John, and everyone's John, and everyone's John. To take your money, to take your soul, they can't
The Gnostic belief in the demiurge portrays it as a cunning force that ensnares humanity in a state of ignorance and delusion. This malevolent being crafted the flawed physical universe to divert our attention from our innate spiritual essence, leading to ongoing suffering and attachment. In contrast with contemporary theories of extraterrestrial and reptilian influences manipulating human affairs, the demiurge signifies a deceptive power structure intent on controlling and deceiving us. By fixating on materialistic cravings and possessions, we perpetuate our bondage to a cycle of ignorance and disconnectedness from our deeper purpose.
Between Western mysticism and Eastern Zen, there is a common trunk between the two. The master does not tell you anything is real. He is not out to convince. He simply becomes his philosophy, and thus is proof in himself. This is the essence of the Philosopher's Stone. If you imagine a utopia, it goes without saying that everyone would have to be cool. It is the wild cards out here that give the government an excuse to run rampant with their own crimes. But hypothetically, if every person was to give as much as they take and not conspire to benefit from the loss of others, the notion is feasible. Imagine now wanting to get into utopia. You would not necessarily have to pass a test as much as understand its meaning. A test can be forgotten and answers gone back on. You've seen elections, and even then, tests are subjective to representing a frozen moment of time in a perpetually changing world. There must be a deeper way of knowing that the wisdom of a person is to the point that everywhere he goes, he leaves that place a little bit better than it was before. This level of consciousness is not easy to come by or attain. The person must understand the hidden element of their subconscious mind that often does wrong while the ego remains blind to it. We have seen how selfish desire can be disguised as virtue, even to the very person in question. Becoming to this point means facing that dark spot of the psyche head on and getting your own hands dirty in the process. It means diving into the dumpster part of the mind and getting to know every portion that you hide from yourself. Some would rather die, and indeed, this is a form of death and rebirth. Once we identify these excess parts of the psyche, only then are they ready to burn away in alchemical fire. Once this death is conquered, you are tempered in the very ever-changing meaning around you. Your will and desire being focused on the betterment of the overall world and not accompanied by the aim of how you see fit. You now enter utopia without a need for that prior inquisition, as you now radiate absolute certitude. Oversimplified as this is, it is the essence of the initiate. Once this has been mastered, beings of the higher and more subtle realms will take notice and begin to adopt you as their peer. Again, oversimplified, but this is the intro. Like Thoth and many like him, you are now considered the spaceborne initiate. The you has now died before any kind of physical death. You beat death at its own game, and now when physical death comes knocking, it has nothing to take home. Like the predators of primordial man and the archons of modern man, even death does not dare lay his hands on the flame.
Shiva Shambho Swayambho Bo Shiva Shambho Swayambho